They invited the fat girl to reunion to mock her. Her helicopter landing and kids stunned all. The cobbled streets, the ancient spires of the academy, the laughter that once tore at her heart, all of it belonged to another life, a life she had tried to bury. Yet here she was, summoned by the very people who had made her childhood unbearable. They had called her back with cruel intentions, whispering her name like a jest, expecting the same shy, awkward girl they once mocked. They could not imagine how much had changed. Mist curled around the hills surrounding Thaler like a protective cloak, and as Alara approached, the first glimmers of dawn touched the castle towers. She did not ride a simple carriage or a horse. Instead, she descended upon a chariot of shadow and light, a spectral creation that hovered a few feet above the ground, wings of smoke and shimmering silver stretching from its sides. It moved with silent grace, and every eye at the academy gates turned toward her in astonishment. Alara felt the whispers before she even reached the main courtyard. "Is that her?" someone gasped. "She's changed," another murmured, but even their awe could not mask the uncertainty in their voices. For the first time, they did not see the awkward girl they once humiliated. They saw someone powerful, confident, and unafraid, a force that seemed almost otherworldly. Inside her chest, Alara's heart beat like a drum, not from fear, but from a swirl of emotions she had not yet named. She had not returned to Thaler merely to show them what she had become. She had returned for herself. For the years of quiet suffering, for the moments she had wished to vanish and never return, she was finally standing tall. Yet beneath her composure, a flicker of vulnerability remained, a longing to be seen, to be recognized not as a joke, but as a person of worth. As she moved through the courtyard, the cobblestones seemed to hum beneath her feet. Her old classmates whispered among themselves, their faces pale and startled. They had grown into adulthood, some more elegant than others, but all carried the invisible scars of their past. And now, confronted with Alara, they felt the sting of surprise and shame mingling with a strange, unspoken fascination. Among the crowd, one figure caught her attention immediately. Caius, the heir to a cursed lineage, leaned against the stone archway, observing her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. He was tall, his presence commanding, and yet there was a darkness in his gaze, something unspoken and dangerous. Their eyes met for a long moment, and in that instant, Alara sensed that he, too, carried burdens not visible to the world. Something within her stirred, a connection she could neither name nor deny. The head mistress of the academy, an elegant woman with silver hair and a voice that carried authority like wind through the mountains, approached Alara with a cautious smile. "Welcome back, Alara," she said, bowing slightly. "We never expected you to attend." Alara inclined her head. "I could not resist," she replied, her voice calm yet edged with quiet strength. "It seems the academy needed me more than I knew." The headmistress's eyes widened slightly, betraying a flicker of curiosity or perhaps fear. But before she could respond, a group of students began to murmur and nudge each other, pointing at Alara. "Remember how she tripped over the fountain," one whispered. "She used to eat alone every day," another added. Their words, meant to mock, now sounded hollow and frightened in the presence of her new aura. Alara smiled softly, a small curve of her lips that did not carry malice but confidence. She did not need to speak to assert her power. It radiated naturally from her, woven into every movement, every glance. Even the air around her seemed charged, responding to the shift in her presence. Yet, despite the triumph she felt, doubt tugged at her. Could she trust this power? Could she trust herself? Memories of cruel laughter and whispered insults lingered like shadows at the edge of her mind. She had grown stronger, yes, but the scars of the past were not easily erased. She needed to navigate the reunion carefully, to show restraint while remaining unshakable. Caius stepped forward from the archway, his dark eyes fixed on her. There was a smile on his lips, but it did not reach the shadowed corners of his gaze. "You've changed," he said quietly, almost as if he feared breaking some fragile truce between past and present. Alara studied him in return. There was a story in those eyes, one of burden and isolation, of secrets and curses carried silently through the years. "And you," she replied, her voice low, "still bear your shadows well." Their brief exchange drew attention from the crowd, a ripple of unease passing through those who had gathered to witness her return. Even the bravest among them found themselves unsure, caught between recognition and fear, awe and envy. As the morning unfolded, the reunion began in the grand hall, a cavernous space of vaulted ceilings and ornate tapestries depicting the Academy's history. Alara walked among her peers, exchanging polite words, her every movement graceful and measured. Yet her eyes continually sought Caius, whose presence lingered like a silent storm at the edge of the room. Every glance between them crackled with unspoken tension, a magnetism neither could fully name. Alara's mind, however, was not entirely on romance or intrigue. She noticed the subtle changes in the academy, the enchanted mirrors that reflected not only appearances but emotions, the whispering shadows that shifted with a life of their own, the faint glow of ancient wards embedded in the stone walls. Magic had always been a quiet pulse in this place, but now it felt alive, watching, responding to her presence. She could feel it, a resonance that hummed through her very being, as if the castle itself recognized her transformation. During the midday gathering, a group of former classmates approached, their expressions carefully neutral, but their eyes betrayed curiosity tinged with unease. "We never thought you'd come back," one said, his voice tight. "You look different." Alara inclined her head, allowing a polite smile to grace her features. "I am different," she admitted simply. "Time changes us all. Some of us learn from it." Her words, calm yet pointed, drew a silence over the group. They had expected mockery, perhaps envy, but instead they found the quiet power of someone who had endured and grown stronger. Later, as the sun dipped lower and the hall darkened with the approaching evening, Alara found herself on the balcony overlooking the mist-shrouded gardens. The wind carried scents of night-blooming flowers, and the air was thick with possibility. Caius joined her there, stepping silently, his presence close enough to feel the warmth of his intent without words. "You've become someone the world cannot ignore," he said softly. "Yet I wonder, beneath this power, who is Alara now?" Alara's gaze met his, steady and unflinching. Someone who has learned to stand alone and to choose whom to trust. Their hands almost touched, separated by a breath of space and hesitation. The air between them was charged, a tension built on years of unspoken understanding, desire, and fear. Neither knew what the future held, yet each sensed that the other held a key to the mysteries they both carried. As night fell and the first stars began to shine above Thaler, the castle itself seemed to hold its breath. Shadows danced along the walls, and the wind whispered secrets through the towers. Alara and Caius remained on the balcony, two figures poised on the edge of something vast and unknown. The reunion had begun, but the true journey, the test of power, trust, and the fragile stirrings of the heart, was only just starting. And in the distance, hidden among the folds of mist and darkness, a presence stirred, watching them, waiting. Alara did not yet know that this encounter would mark the beginning of a story far greater than any she had imagined. A story of power, of redemption, and of a love that could either save them both or shatter everything they had fought to reclaim. For now she stood tall, spectral chariot parked behind her, mist swirling around her feet. The past was behind her, yet its echoes lingered, ready to challenge her again. But Alara would not falter. She would face it all, not as the girl who had once been mocked, but as a force reborn from shadows and light. And as her eyes met Caius, one last time before retreating inside, the unspoken question hung in the air like a promise. Who will claim their destiny first, the curse or the heart? The great hall of the academy had never seemed so alive. Candles flickered in the vaulted ceiling, casting golden light that danced across the tapestries and stone walls. Students and alumni alike mingled, yet all eyes seemed drawn to Alara. Even those who had once mocked her now whispered behind gloved hands, unsure how to approach someone who seemed more a force of nature than a former classmate. Alara moved gracefully through the crowd, her steps quiet but commanding. Every gesture was deliberate, every glance carefully measured. The old wounds of ridicule had shaped her, but they no longer defined her. She had learned to carry herself with the poise of someone who had faced shadows alone and emerged stronger. Caius was never far from her thoughts. He lingered near the grand staircase, watching her with an intensity that made the air between them almost visible. His gaze was not just curiosity, it was challenge, warning, and perhaps admiration. Alara could feel the tension like a thread, pulling her toward him even as she reminded herself to remain cautious. Her attention, however, could not ignore the subtle jabs of her former classmates. A group of 3 approached, forcing smiles that did not reach their eyes. "We didn't expect you to attend," one said, his voice carefully neutral. "You've changed." Alara met their words with calm eyes. "I have grown," she said simply. "Some of us learn from our mistakes, others only remember them." The group faltered, their polite smiles wavering. Alara did not need to raise her voice or strike with words. Her presence, now a blend of quiet confidence and subtle power, made the air shift. Even the enchanted mirrors along the hall reflected not their faces, but their unease. Magic, alive and ancient in these walls, recognized her strength and responded. From the corner of her eye, she saw Caius step closer. "You command more than their attention," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Even the magic here seems to answer to you." Alara smiled faintly, not in vanity but in acknowledgement. "Perhaps it senses who I have become. Perhaps it recognizes what I refuse to be again." He nodded, studying her like one might study a rare, dangerous flower. "And yet, I wonder if you know how dangerous it can be to command such forces without guidance." "I know," she replied, her tone steady, "and I am ready to learn more." For the next hours, the reunion unfolded in a delicate dance of conversation, observation, and quiet tension. Alara's every encounter with her former classmates reminded her of the old power dynamics, how they had once ruled her world through fear and ridicule. But now, the balance had shifted. She could choose to dominate, to humiliate, or to rise above. She chose the latter, and in doing so, she found a strange satisfaction in observing their reactions. Caius appeared beside her again as the evening deepened. The hall had grown quieter, the murmurs fading as the night shadows lengthened. He gestured toward one of the windows, where moonlight poured over the gardens outside. "There is more at play here than simple rivalry," he said softly. "These walls hold secrets, and not all of them welcome us." Alara followed his gaze. Mist rose from the gardens, curling around statues and hedges in pale silver tendrils. "I know," she admitted. "The magic here, it has always been aware. Perhaps it waits for me to claim it fully." Caius's lips curved in a faint, approving smile. "You are not afraid." "Fear is a luxury I cannot afford," she said, her eyes steady on his. "And you should know by now that I do not bow easily." He chuckled softly, a sound that carried warmth and mystery at the same time. "No, you do not. Perhaps that is why I am drawn to you." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a group of alumni who had once been particularly cruel. They approached, their smiles forced and tight, as if their composure depended on masking the unease Alara inspired. "You've certainly changed," one said, attempting a casual tone. "We didn't expect someone like you to return with such presence." Alara regarded him calmly. "I have returned not to please your expectations," she said softly, "but to claim what is mine." The words struck the group more deeply than they expected. They faltered, realizing that the girl they had once mocked was no longer the same. Their insults had no weight here. Their ridicule was powerless against someone who had transformed her pain into strength. Later, Ilara wandered alone into the quieter corners of the academy. The enchanted corridors hummed softly, shadows shifting as if aware of her presence. The magic in the walls, ancient and watchful, seemed to whisper her name, guiding her toward something unseen. She found herself in the old library, a place she had spent countless hours studying and hiding as a child. Dust motes danced in the candlelight, and the scent of old parchment filled the air. Caius appeared beside her silently, as though summoned by her thoughts. "You return to the places of your old life," he said, his tone a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Do you seek answers or closure?" "Perhaps both," Ilara replied. "This place holds memories, yes, but also the beginnings of what I am becoming. I need to remember that even in the shadows there is power to be found." He nodded, stepping closer. "And do you trust yourself with it?" "I trust myself to learn," she said, meeting his gaze, "and to choose wisely." Their connection, unspoken yet palpable, seemed to pull the air between them taut. It was a bond built on shared understanding, on pain endured and strength forged. Neither of them spoke for long minutes, letting the silence stretch, filled only with the whisper of pages and the hum of ancient magic. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught Ilara's eye. A shadow shifted unnaturally across the far wall of the library. She turned swiftly, sensing danger, but the figure dissolved into the darkness. Her pulse quickened, and she felt the stirrings of old fears, a reminder that the reunion was not merely about confrontation with classmates, but that hidden forces still lingered in Thaler, watching, waiting. Caius noticed her tension. "The shadows here are restless tonight," he said quietly. "They sense more than we do." Ilara nodded. "Then we must be careful. Even small mistakes can awaken them." As the night grew deeper, the reunion drew to a close. Students and alumni drifted away, leaving only a few lingering conversations. Ilara and Caius stepped onto the balcony once more, overlooking the misty gardens below. The moon hung low, its light silver and cold, and the wind carried the scent of night-blooming flowers and ancient earth. "You are fearless," Caius said softly, his hand brushing against hers, deliberately close yet not touching. "Yet I sense the night holds trials for you still." Ilara's gaze met his. "I am ready," she said firmly. "Whatever comes, I will face it, alone if I must, but not without understanding it first." He studied her as if weighing her words and her spirit. "And if the trial is not meant to be faced alone?" he asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. She smiled faintly, the edge of her lips curving with quiet determination. "Then I will choose carefully whom to trust." The tension between them, unspoken yet undeniable, seemed to pulse in the very air. Every shadow, every flicker of candlelight whispered of power, of secrets, of desires unspoken. The night stretched before them, filled with possibility and danger alike. As Ilara turned to leave the balcony, a chill wind swept across the stone floor. She shivered, not from cold but from a sense of foreboding. Something unseen stirred in the distance, beyond the gardens, beyond the mists. The academy, ancient and watchful, seemed to hold its breath, anticipating what was to come. Caius's voice broke the silence, low and steady. "Tonight is only the beginning, Ilara. The world outside these walls will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine, and so will I." She met his gaze, understanding the weight behind his words. Power, trust, and desire intertwined, forming a complex dance that neither of them could yet control. As the first stars gleamed overhead, Ilara felt the pulse of the academy beneath her feet. She had arrived to claim her place, to confront the ghosts of her past, and to challenge the currents of fate. Yet she knew that the true test, the dance of power, trust, and heart, was only beginning. And in the shadows, unseen but very real, a force stirred, ancient and patient, waiting to measure her strength. The night deepened. The air was thick with possibility. And Alara, standing tall against the wind, felt a spark of destiny ignite, a spark that would guide her, test her, and perhaps lead her into the arms of the one person who might understand the power she now commanded. The dance of power had begun. The moon hung high over Thaler, casting silver light across the Mistewad. The trees twisted skyward, their branches like fingers reaching toward the heavens, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and night-blooming flowers. Alara walked beside Caius, her cloak brushing against the moss-covered ground, each step deliberate. The mist swirled around them, curling like living smoke, and the shadows of the forest seemed to watch, moving in silent anticipation. "This place has always been dangerous," Caius said quietly, his voice low enough that it barely carried beyond their steps. "Many who enter the Mistewad never return the same, or at all." Alara nodded, her eyes fixed on the twisting path ahead. "I am aware. But I cannot ignore what waits here, the answers, the truth, and perhaps my own strength." Caius studied her, the faint glow of his eyes reflecting in the mist. "You have grown powerful," he said, "but do you know what this place can awaken in you? The forest does not forgive fear or doubt." "I have learned to face both," Alara replied, her voice steady, "and I will not falter." The first challenge came quickly. Shadows coalesced between the trees, dark forms shifting unnaturally, whispering in voices that mimicked the fears of their hearts. Alara froze for a moment, recognizing the illusions, the forest feeding on memories of ridicule, pain, and regret. The shadows circled them, murmuring the cruel words of classmates long gone, voices distorted and mocking. Caius stepped forward, his hand brushing hers in a gesture of solidarity. "Do not let them touch your mind," he warned. "They are not real, only we are real." Alara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath and focused on the pulse of magic within her. She let it rise, a steady glow in her chest, and the shadows recoiled slightly, hissing like wind through dead leaves. "I am more than your whispers," she said aloud, her voice clear and unyielding. "I am Alara, and I am stronger than fear." The forest stilled, but the tension remained, thick and suffocating. Every step forward became a test of courage, a battle between inner doubt and the power she had cultivated over years of solitude. Caius remained at her side, his presence a steadying force, yet the weight of his own secrets pressed upon him. As they walked deeper, the trees parted to reveal a silver lake, glowing unnaturally beneath the moonlight. Its waters were still, yet the reflection upon its surface was not just theirs, it showed the fears they carried within. In the rippling image, Alara saw herself as the girl who had once been mocked, fragile and alone, and then beside her, the powerful figure she had become. Both versions stared back at her, asking the same question: who would she choose to be? Caius knelt beside the water, his fingers skimming the surface. "The curse within me," he said quietly, "will test us both. My bloodline has been bound to this forest for centuries. Every heir must sacrifice something dear. I feared that returning here with you would place you in danger." Alara looked at him, understanding dawning. "And yet I am here. I do not fear danger. I fear only losing myself to doubt or bitterness. Your curse, it is not my enemy. Your fear is not mine to bear." He lifted his gaze to hers, a mixture of admiration and sorrow in his eyes. "You are unlike anyone I have ever known, strong, brave, yet unafraid to feel." Their hands brushed again, and for a moment the world narrowed to the two of them, standing beside the silver lake, shadows of trees stretching like silent witnesses. But the forest was not done. A sudden tremor shook the ground, and from the lake, mist rose, thick and curling, forming shapes that glimmered with an eerie light. Figures of shadow and water, creatures born from ancient magic, emerged, circling them with silent intent. Alara and Caius drew closer. "We must face them together," he said. "Trust me," she nodded. "Always." The first figure lunged, a twisting shadow with sharp, shifting edges. Alara felt fear rise for a heartbeat, but she steadied herself, letting her magic flow through her. A soft, silver light emanated from her hands, forming a barrier that met the shadow's strike. The force of it made the air hum, and the figure recoiled, dissolving into mist. Chaos followed, striking with precision and controlled power. Together they moved in synchrony, anticipating each other's steps, guarding one another. Their hearts raced, not just from fear, but from the thrill of shared struggle, an intimacy that words could never capture. When the last of the figures dissolved, the lake's surface stilled once more, leaving only the reflection of moonlight and the two of them standing side by side. Breathing heavily, Alara met Caius's gaze, and in that look there was understanding. They had survived, but the forest had more to teach them. Caius extended his hand. "There is a relic," he said, "deep within the forest. It holds the key to my curse. But to reach it, we must confront what we fear most within ourselves." Alara's heart tightened. "And if we fail, then the curse will claim me," he said quietly, "and perhaps more." The path to the relic was a twisting labyrinth of mist and shadows. Each step required courage, each breath demanded focus. Along the way, they encountered visions, memories of lost loved ones, moments of shame, echoes of laughter meant to wound. Alara felt the weight of years pressing against her, but Caius's presence grounded her. Together, they whispered words of reassurance, words that bolstered both courage and connection. Finally, they reached a clearing where the relic rested, a silver orb etched with symbols that pulsed faintly with light. It floated above a stone pedestal, surrounded by a circle of ancient runes. The air thrummed with magic, and Alara could feel the orb's power calling to her, testing her resolve. "You must touch it," Caius said, his voice low. "Only one pure of heart and mind can activate it without being consumed." Alara hesitated, the fear and doubt rising like a tide. Then she looked at Caius, his steady presence, his trust, his own courage reflected in his eyes. "I am ready," she said softly. Her fingers grazed the orb, and a surge of energy passed through her. The mist around them swirled violently, forming visions of the past and possible futures. Alara's mind was tested, her greatest fears, her deepest regrets, but she held on, grounding herself in the truth she had built, her strength, her growth, and the bond she shared with Caius. Caius placed his hand over hers, adding his own strength to hers. Together, their combined will stabilize the orb, and a blinding light filled the clearing. When it faded, the relic rested harmlessly on the pedestal, its magic calm. The curse that had haunted Caius's bloodline for centuries was lifted, or at least weakened, its power broken by their trust and courage. Alara fell back slightly, breathing heavily, and Caius caught her hand. "You did it," he said, awe and relief mingling in his voice. "You saved us both." Alara smiled faintly, her chest still pounding. "We saved each other," she corrected. For a moment the forest seemed to sigh in relief. The shadows receded, the mist softened, and the night felt less threatening. The bond between them had deepened in ways words could not express. They had faced fear, temptation, and the weight of the past, and had emerged stronger together. But as they turned to leave, a distant rustling echoed through the trees. Something stirred beyond the clearing, a presence ancient and patient, watching. Alara felt it, a reminder that their trials were not over. The curse within Caius was weakened, yes, but the world still held mysteries and dangers that neither of them had yet faced. Caius tightened his grip on her hand. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together." Alara nodded, feeling the surge of both relief and anticipation. "Together," she echoed. As they walked back through the Mistuad, the bond between them was unspoken but undeniable. Every glance, every touch, every shared breath carried the weight of trust and the spark of something deeper, something neither fully understood but both felt. And as the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the forest seemed to hold its breath once more. A story of courage, love, and destiny was unfolding, and the next chapter promised trials even greater than those they had faced. But for now, Ilara and Caius had survived the darkness, and in each other's presence, they had discovered a power far greater than any curse: faith, trust, and a connection that could withstand shadow, fear, and time itself. The forest behind them whispered of future challenges, but they did not falter. They were ready. And the world, full of magic, shadows, and destiny, would soon learn that their story had only just begun. The first light of dawn spilled over Thaler, casting the kingdom in shades of gold and silver. The castle towers glimmered, their stones warmed by the morning sun. Birds sang softly in the gardens, their songs mingling with the rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle wind. It was a calm morning, yet beneath its beauty lay tension, an anticipation that could be felt in the quiet corners of the palace. Ilara and Caius stood on the highest balcony, overlooking the courtyard below. The reunion had ended the night before, leaving whispers of awe and surprise among the former classmates. Some had witnessed the power Ilara had displayed, others had felt the subtle shift in Caius as the curse that had haunted his bloodline for generations had been weakened. Now, the kingdom itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. Ilara adjusted her cloak, the morning breeze lifting strands of her hair. "It feels different here now," she said softly. "The castle, the courtyard, even the air seems lighter." Caius nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "The curse has been lifted, or at least broken enough for the shadow to recede. But there is more to do. Power is only useful when it is tempered with understanding. The kingdom has suffered long enough under fear and superstition." Ilara followed his gaze. She saw the people below, guards, students, and teachers, moving through the courtyard, unaware of the quiet storm that had passed over their lives the night before. Some glanced up toward the balcony, catching sight of the pair, and a wave of curiosity rippled through them. "We've come far," she said quietly, turning to face him, "but I feel like our journey is only beginning." Caius smiled faintly, a rare softness touching his features. "That is true," he admitted. "Yet what we have achieved together, what you have achieved, will shape everything to come." The tension of the past years, the ridicule, the isolation, the fear of power, felt lighter now. Ilara realized she had grown in ways she had never imagined. The girl who had once been mocked for her appearance and awkwardness was no longer defined by her past. She was someone who commanded respect, who had faced darkness and emerged stronger. And standing beside her was someone who understood her, someone who had fought his own shadows and now trusted her with his heart. The morning calm was interrupted by movement below. A group of former classmates approached, their expressions wary, uncertain. They had been the ones who had mocked her long ago, but now their eyes held a mixture of fear, respect, and perhaps even admiration. Ilara descended the balcony steps slowly, her presence calm and commanding. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady. "I hope your night was restful." One of the former classmates, a tall man with a hesitant expression, stepped forward. "Ilara, we never expected." His voice faltered, and he glanced at his companions, unsure how to continue. Ilara smiled faintly, the curve of her lips soft but firm. "You never expected me to return as myself," she said. "You never expected me to claim my strength and face the shadows. And yet here I am." The group shifted uncomfortably, realizing that their old mockery held no power here. Ilara's calm, steady presence overshadowed any attempt to belittle her. She did not need to strike with words or gestures. Her strength, confidence, and the quiet magic that surrounded her spoke for themselves. Caius appeared beside her, his hand brushing hers as they moved together. "We have both faced trials," he said softly, "and we have emerged stronger. That is something to be respected, not feared." The former classmates exchanged glances, and one finally spoke. "Ilara, we were wrong," he admitted. "We didn't understand. We see now you are remarkable." Ilara regarded them quietly. The words were not vengeance, they were acknowledgement. She nodded once. "Thank you," she said simply. "I hope you will carry that understanding with you, not just as a memory of me, but as a lesson for yourselves." The former classmates bowed slightly, humbled, and departed without further words. Ilara and Caius watched them go, a shared understanding passing between them. Respect and courage, once earned through struggle, now defined the space between them and the world they had returned to. As they turned toward the castle's inner chambers, Caius spoke again. "The relic, the forest, they have shown us our strengths, but there is one final test. A challenge that is not magic, not shadow, but heart." Ilara raised an eyebrow. "Heart?" "Yes," he said, taking a step closer. "To rule, to protect, to shape the future, we must trust ourselves and each other completely. That is the final trial. Not of power, but of love, loyalty, and courage." Her heart fluttered at his words, and she realized how deeply she had come to care for him. Not just as a partner in battle or a guide through the forest, but as someone whose presence grounded her, whose understanding and strength intertwined with her own. They entered the castle together, moving through familiar halls now tinged with new meaning. The magic of the place hummed softly beneath their feet, responsive to their presence, guiding them toward the throne room where the kingdom's council awaited. The ancient chambers were filled with light streaming through stained glass, and the air was thick with expectation. The council members rose as Ilara and Caius entered. Their expressions were a mixture of awe and caution. For years, the kingdom had feared the shadow over Caius's lineage, and the mysterious power that had emerged alongside Ilara was no less intimidating. Yet there was a new light in their eyes, hope, tempered with respect. Ilara stepped forward, her cloak flowing behind her. "The darkness that haunted this kingdom," she began, her voice steady, "has been faced. The curse that weighed on this land and on Caius has been weakened, broken by courage, trust, and understanding. We are not here to rule with fear, but to guide with wisdom." Caius stood beside her, his presence strong and calm. "The trials we have faced together have shown us the path forward," he said. "A path that is not forged by power alone, but by compassion, loyalty, and the courage to face the truth within ourselves." The council members exchanged glances, nodding slowly. The weight of history, of fear and superstition, began to lift in the light of Ilara and Caius's unity. The kingdom itself seemed to exhale, the shadows of past misdeeds and curses fading in the warmth of their presence. After the council had spoken, Ilara and Caius stepped onto the palace balcony once more. The wind lifted around them, carrying the sense of blooming gardens and the promise of a new day. The city below was waking, and the people looked up to see two figures who had faced darkness and emerged unbroken. Caius took her hand, their fingers entwining naturally. "We have done more than survive," he said. "We have changed the kingdom and ourselves." Ilara's gaze met his, and she saw not just admiration but a reflection of her own strength and courage. "And in each other," she said softly, "we have found more than power. We have found trust, understanding, and perhaps something deeper." Caius smiled, a warmth that reached his eyes. "Something worth protecting," he agreed. For a moment they stood in silence, watching the city bathe in the morning sun. The trials of the past, the whispers, the shadows, the fear, had shaped them, but they no longer controlled them. The curse was gone, the forest's tests had been faced, and the weight of history had been met with courage and wisdom. Ilara felt a lightness she had never known, a freedom born from understanding and acceptance. She had faced her fears, reclaimed her power, and discovered that true strength lay not in dominating others but in mastering herself. And beside her, Caius had faced his own burdens, found trust, and offered her his heart without fear. The people of Thaler began to gather in the courtyard below, catching sight of the two figures above. Whispers of awe and admiration spread like wildfire. The girl who had once been mocked for her appearance, the heir who had carried a centuries-old curse, together, they had become a symbol of hope, courage, and unity. Alara lifted her chin, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. "The kingdom will grow stronger and so will we." Caius squeezed her hand gently. "Together," he said, and in that moment the wind seemed to carry their words across the city, across the hills, and into the hearts of all who would listen. The story of Alara and Caius, a tale of shadows faced, curses broken, and hearts united, would be remembered for generations. The balcony was bathed in golden light as the two of them finally allowed themselves to breathe, to relax, to feel the depth of what they had accomplished and what they had discovered in each other. Alara glanced at Caius, a smile spreading across her face. "We have survived the darkness," she said. "Now we can shape the light." Caius nodded, his eyes filled with promise. "And whatever challenges come next, we will face them together, always." Above them, the sky stretched wide and endless, the sun rising fully to illuminate the kingdom. And in that light, Alara and Caius stood tall, not just as individuals who had conquered fear, but as partners bound by trust, courage, and love. A love that had grown through trials and shadows and now promised a future filled with hope and possibility. For the first time in their lives, neither past nor curse could touch them. They were free. And as they looked out over Thaler, hand in hand, the world seemed to whisper a single truth. The story of Alara and Caius had reached a moment of triumph, yet the adventure of life, love, and destiny would continue, forever entwined. The kingdom would remember. The shadows would remember. But above all, they would remember them, unbroken, united, and free.